Hi, everybody. Raina here, and welcome to Book Banter. Today, I am going to be talking with Rebecca Thorne, which I'm very excited about. She is a USA Today, Indie, and Sunday Times bestselling author specializing in fantasy, sci-fi, and romantic. She is a proud member of the LGBTQIA plus community, hailing from sunny Arizona. And she uses her ADHD as a superpower to write multiple books a year. When she's not writing or avoiding writing, we can all relate. Rebecca has been found traveling the country as a flight attendant, hiking with her dogs and lovely wife, or basking in the sun like a lizard, which in Arizona, that is kind of an easy thing to do. I am super excited to talk with her about her latest book, A Pirate's Life for Tea, this Tomes and Tea series. I can't wait to tell you the story about how I first came into contact with it, because that was a lot of fun. And this is the second in the series. Both the third and fourth are coming out later this year. So without further ado, I'm going to click this and welcome Rebecca. Hi to Book Banter.
Hi. Welcome. I'm very excited.
Yay. Well, thank you for joining me. I know that I told you via email, but I wanted to tell everyone how I came into contact with your books. Being a bookseller, I had seen them, but I hadn't really looked too deep into the story. And then the audio popped up, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to listen to this. It's going to be great. It's time, right?
Oh, the audio is so good.
The audio is so good.
It's so good. Like, she has that like British accent, and I'm just like, oh.
It's so perfect. And it's kind of like, there's this sort of almost kind of nondescript like fantasy accent that's sort of British, sort of Irish. It's sort of just like, I don't know where they're from, but I love it. And she's nailing it.
She's so good. Like I'm sure we'll get into all of this, but I was self-published with that book when I found her as my narrator, and I agreed to have her as my narrator for this series and entered a contract with her like literally like 2 weeks before Tor UK got involved and bought the series. But I literally had to have them put a clause in the contract that was like, you will use my narrator, Jessica Threet, because I already told her she could do it, and she's really, really good. She beat out 52 other interviews. So like I had auditions for 51 other narrators, and hers just like, it was so good. I mean, like we had her do a second one, and it was like equally drop dead amazing. And we were just like, oh yeah. So
like, this is it. I love that when that happens with any kind of like interview or audition, and you're just like, I hope we find the right one. I hope we find the right one. And then they walk in the room.
And then they walk. Yeah. Well, and she was like a last minute one too. Like we had a couple others that we liked but didn't love. And then like literally like the last day she emailed and was like, I'm submitting something. Please don't close it yet. And I just listened, and like, so we listened to hers, kind of closer to the end of all the pool. And we were just like, holy mackerel. Like she is so good. So we, I think, asked for second auditions for like 10 of the narrators. And like her second audition was the first one we listened to. And it was perfect. It was everything. So
now as a self-published author, who you say we, but like, who is that?
It was my, so we actually made a day of it. So it was me, my then girlfriend. No, we weren't even dating at the time. She was just a friend back then. That was we were dating. January 2023 is when we started dating. So it was like right around when we first started dating, but she lived in Illinois at the time. So she Skyped in and listened. And then my sister and I want to say I think our other friend came over. And so it was like me and my sister and our other friend. And then my girlfriend was Skyping in. And we literally had like a PowerPoint where we just like went through. And like, I will say, listening to the same passage 52 different times with 52 different accents got super tedious. So like it started really fun. And then over the course of time, we were just like, oh my God, there's so many. Like, each of the auditions was like 3 minutes long. So we ended up having to start like skipping past depending on like what ones we could tell were already not a good fit. It was tedious. It was long. I didn't expect to get that many auditions for it. But I was very glad that I did. So
that it does sound like I understand how it gets tedious, but it does sound like a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah. It feels like one of those opportunities where you have to keep reminding yourself, like, this is I get to do this.
Yeah. It was genuinely a great time. And narrators are very important to me because audiobooks are such an accessibility feature for a lot of people. So it was very like, once I could afford it, even as an indie author, I was like, this is important to me. I had like, there's a couple of places that will produce your audiobook for you for free. But then they get the rights to it for like 7 years. And I didn't want to do that because I was like, maybe publishers will be interested. And if you sell your audiobook rights right away, it's harder to get a big 5 deal. So like, I didn't have interest when I made that decision, but I was like, I don't want to close off any doors, like just in case. So I literally did that. And then like 2 weeks later, Tor UK won an auction that we ended up having going on at the time, which was wild. So.
Well, I'm very glad they did. 'Cause that's how I came into contact with it. And so my name is Raina, Rayna. And
Yay.
yes. And one of your 2 main characters' name is Raina, Reyna.
Yes, it's this one.
I did not know that. I knew generally what the book was about, did not do my due diligence. I was like, I don't need to. I'm going to enjoy this, right?
Yeah.
It's the type of book I'm going to enjoy. So I did not read the back of it or anything. And as soon as the audiobook starts and it's like, Raina, and I'm like, was that?
I know, in that like voice with this like really like,
oh yeah, you're like, I'm not doing this justice at all. Y'all have to listen to it yourself. But it's just my name, and I'm like, what is happening?
You're like, hi?
It's such a surreal experience. Like, I've met a couple other people with my name, but it's not common enough to like hear it all the time.
Yeah, it's a pretty rare name. I really didn't know that there were Rainas in the world until I wrote this book series and started meeting them at my book signings. But I've still, I think to this day, only met like 3. Like, they're very rare.
Yeah, it's rare enough where it was a very surreal experience the first car ride when I started this audiobook, and I literally talked to myself. I was like, am I going to be okay with this for 11 hours? Like, there was a moment where it's like, am I good? And then I'm like, Raina, get it together.
Get it together. She's a badass character. You're going to love it.
It's a badass character. You're enjoying this book. Do not let this stop you. Come on. And I'm so glad that I did.
Yeah.
So glad that I did.
That's great. Yeah, I haven't met any Kiants yet, but I have met a couple Rainas, which is pretty cool. So
where did you come up with the names? Like, did you hear them somewhere?
So people always ask me this, and it's so sad. Like, I'm not creative, and like, I don't waste time on names because I feel like if I did go down that rabbit hole, wasting time on coming up with names, I literally would be only coming up with names and I wouldn't be writing any books. And I have too many books to write to like sit there. So like literally like Shapara is one of the characters' names, or one of the like country names. I literally looked on the ground and saw my shepherd laying on the ground. It was like Shepherd, Shapara. And I wrote that in, and that stayed, like the queendom and the capital. Clearly I was very unique and creative when I put those into, I was like the queendom, right? Like dragon country, just like this stupid stuff like that. So with the names of the main characters, I knew I liked our names, so I was just kind of playing around with some letters, and I liked the name Raina. It sounded nice and pretty, and I liked it. And then with Kianth, I had just finished reading Nona the Ninth, and so I, for the Gideon the Ninth series, so I was listening to the audiobook, and that is Ianthe, I think. Ianthe. There's a character named Ianthe, and I just added a K to it. Nice. Like, it was just like, it's so stupid. Like, I'm not creative. People are like, you have such great names. I'm like, no, it's just me mashing together like letters on a keyboard and hoping that no one notices.
But that's a really good lesson though to people, to writers and other creative endeavors, is that you just don't get stuck in the minutia, in the nitty gritty.
Yeah,
right?
I feel like if I'm writing a chapter and I get to a point where something needs to be named, I can either take a break for 40 minutes and name it properly, or I can just put something stupid in. And then the more it comes up, the more I'm like, that's not right. That's not right. And I have to but sometimes it is. Sometimes I like see it over 15 pages and my stupid thing ends up sticking around like Shapara, because I was like, you know what? That's good. There could be a country named Shapara. My shepherd will be pleased. Like,
have you ever seen Cannibal the Musical? Mm-mm. It's by, it's Matt Stone and Trey Parker from South Park.
Oh,
creators
nice.
of South Park.
It would probably be hilarious then.
It is hilarious. And they did it before they did South Park, and it was like a college project, and it is the Donner Party, but it's a musical. That's really all you need to know.
Amazing. Yep.
Except there's a song in it, and spadoinkle is a word. They couldn't figure out the word that they wanted to use like to describe what kind of day they were having. And so it's a spadoinkle day is they just stuck it in there, right? It's their writing, and they just keep going and keep going. And that's the song. And it is stuck in my head all the time. You have a spadoinkle day. And it just stuck. And they sung it that way. And they were like, we like this. It's fine. It's ridiculous. It doesn't mean anything. But the way they shot it, you get the idea. Yeah. It's just this beautiful day that they're having. And I'm like, just go with it. So
it's honestly, I feel like that's just kind of how things, like that's how languages work. You know, like there are just a lot of things that come in and we're just collectively as a group like, yeah, that makes sense. Let's use that word for something. And then it becomes like common vernacular, you know?
Right. That's exactly how they decide to add words to the dictionary. Just keep using it.
Yep.
Press on.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. Okay. So I always ask this of like fantasy authors especially, but anything where there's lots of potentially you're making up, names at places and stuff. Is there a book? Is there a family tree? Is there a map? How do you keep track?
I don't do a very good job of it, and it gets me into trouble because I will have things that come back 50 pages later that I'm like, what was the name of that character again? Fuck, and then I have to go back in and spend, again, another 25 minutes scrolling through all the stuff that I already wrote to remember what that was called, or if I like referenced it, or if that was in a previous draft, etc. Typically, I have a Scrivener page, and I try to, I have a Scrivener document for every book, and I usually write like a query letter. I do like my little 5-sentence method to keep track of the plot. And then I usually have like a document that's just called like words, and I just drop words ad nauseum in there if there's like weird names of things. It has been very helpful in the series situation to like record. Like I've been trying to get more meticulous in like books 3 and 4 in recording what characters are introduced in each book, because I will reference them in later books. And so like I need to remember what those names are, right? So I have like book 1 is these characters, book 2 is these characters. I'll add their pronouns. I'll add, like any distinguishing features about them. And then I'll just like keep that in like a Word thing, but it's not very meticulous. My publisher does a style sheet, which is like an editorial thing where they basically just go in and create like, oh, we, capitalize this name in this way when it's used this way, and so like they'll create a style sheet, but they have like the names of all the different like cast members and because they're copy editors, they're like very meticulous in recording the style sheet. And then they send that to me. And that's actually more thorough and much more helpful than anything that I'm creating on my own. So
that you're like, look, I made a bunch of notes. Thanks for organizing them for me.
Yeah, no, I'm literally like, oh, this is way better. Thank you. So like, again, it's one of those things where I'm like, if I'm spending time on all of that stuff, I could be writing, and I would rather be putting words on paper that I can sell later, So
when I imagine, like you mention ADHD a lot obviously it's in your official bio, but then like if you're watching your Instagram and whatever, if TikTok is in again now,
like
whatever.
TikTok-ish on occasion sometimes.
Yeah. And now it's just like that not dependable person in your life. Like they're really great when they're there, but then they could just not show up when they said they were going to.
I don't doom scroll on Instagram, but I doom scroll on TikTok. So I was actually moving over to Instagram well before this ban even became a thing. Like I was literally like trying to move over like 6 months ago to Instagram because I was just like, there's more sales to be had, and people go on to TikTok to be entertained and informed, and they go on to Instagram to buy things. So like as an author trying to sell books, there's one platform that's much better than the other for selling books. Like TikTok was really great in the beginning to generate organic buzz. Like it basically was like the water cooler, right? And so like all of that, like they go on to be informed, right? And so a lot of times they're being informed about a particular book, and that was helpful. Now that my books are everywhere in all these bookstores, it's a lot better for me if I'm creating a presence on an app that like actually directs people to buy them. So it just made more sense at the time.
Whatever. It's so ADHD, right?
Yeah.
What you're describing sounds exactly like you can keep all these notes, but if you let yourself get sidetracked by that, now we'll be spending all day just coming up with one name.
Now there's a rabbit hole, and I will never get back to. Yeah, it's like getting up to get a cup of coffee, and you start the coffee, and then you see something in the fridge that you forgot to throw out, and then all of a sudden you look at the sink, and there's stuff in the sink, and then you forgot that you were making coffee, and 18 minutes go by, right? Like it's like that. So when I am dealing with that, like Adderall has helped, I will say, but like Adderall it's not a fix-all. It just kind of gets you like a little more energized to do the thing. So I do have these like systems in place where I'm like, okay, like if I have a to-do list, it's a physical to-do list. It's like, oh, these are the papers that I need to sort through. And I put them on my keyboard so that when I sit down at my desk, the first thing that I see is this physical stack of papers that needs to be dealt with, right? It's kind of like that in my books. Like I don't let myself get distracted by stupid things inside my novel that I can fix later. I would rather be putting words on paper because like the first draft takes forever for me just because, not really, comparatively, I'm actually very fast at drafting, but it feels like it takes forever for me because all of the magic happens in edits. So like the first draft is always like 70% of the way there or 60% of the way there. And then I just like wrap it up in edits. So I'm always trying to get to edits faster because that's where like my magic happens. I don't like drafting. I actually hate it. Like starting from 0 to 60. Some people really enjoy diving into their stories. I like having written, not writing.
Yeah. So,
like I like it to be done.
That's when you have to go from beginning to end. You just have to stay relatively linear, or at least in your head, right?
Yeah,
and that's
I stay
when
linear.
You have to keep moving forward. You can't let yourself get distracted. So
yeah,
it's fun in that you're building the actual story.
Yeah,
but it's not the fun. Right? The fun is when you go back and you put the finishing touches and all this stuff. That's when you can add all the flourishes and things like that. Yeah, no, I totally get that. I totally get that. You got to slog through the getting it all on paper part. We do have one question. Okay. They are a beginning writer.
Oh, I didn't even realize we had a chat. I mean, I did. I knew that was there, but I was looking at the private chat, not the hi, everybody.
Oh, yes.
I didn't realize that you all were there. Hello.
Lots of comments. Yes, excited to be here. Thank you all for watching. And if you have any questions, put them in the comments. We will answer them. Yes. But this is just sort of a general, questions. Like, where do I start from?
Oh, I think that that's a pretty good question. And I think it all depends on what your end goals are, which I know is hard when you haven't written a book because you're like, I don't even know what I want this book to be. Rather, regardless of whether or not I want to publish it down the line, I haven't decided. That's okay. Figure out where your end goals are for the book that you're trying to write, if that's where you're at. So either your end goal is publication, and then my answer is which form of publication, because that changes my advice. And if you're still in the book writing phase, it's like, okay, if your goal is to finish a book, what do you want this book to be, right? Like, is your end goal eventually going to be publication, or are you just writing it for yourself? Because one of those is going to have a lot more freedom in like the topic than the other. So I think it just kind of comes down to like where that avenue is. If you want to clarify in the comments, I can help tailor this advice. But it just basically, I think, is going to be open up a Word document and start putting things on paper if you haven't already. Because like the fact of the matter is, like, I hate drafting, but it is a necessity. Like I can't edit what is not there. Like if I go to a blank Word document and try to edit a blank Word document, there's nothing to edit. So you have to get something on paper first. That's where you should start. Which I know is not the advice a lot of people want to hear, because they want to be, I want to plot something, I want to world build. I'm like, yeah, no, those matter.
Well, they come with inside that drafting, because as you're going along, then maybe you do need to build out this city a little bit more, because you need to know where the coffee shop is and where the library is and where the bad guy's house is or whatever. Yeah. But you don't need to start with that.
But you wouldn't. If you just were looking at a blank page, you wouldn't know that you needed those things yet. Right. So like, don't make up things. Again, like, this is my time efficiency thing. Like, people ask how I write so many books a year. This is how. Like, I don't waste time creating a world that I may never need. I write the world, and then I'm like, oh, in this world, I need to know this. And sometimes that does come back to bite me. But for the most part, it's a pretty efficient use of time. So
there you go. Mm-hmm. Okay. Kara is asking, what character took you most by surprise while writing them? And then a follow-up, which one did you have the most fun exploring their arc? So,
Dregs was my favorite character to explore their arc. They are actively transitioning in the next quartet. So you start to see inklings of that happening in this quartet, which is really fun. So introducing them in book 2, they are like this like dastardly pirate dregs, and they're like this like glamorous magical pirate. Like, they're not magical, but they're just very charismatic pirate captain. And I just like had so much fun because they were like if Jack Sparrow was not drunk. Like that's basically how I'm like, they're like very charismatic, very good at what they do, somewhat kind of stupid sometimes, but then they get serious real fast. And they're kind of like, you don't mess with them because they know exactly what they're doing, and they run this massive pirate fleet in the southern seas, and it's just great. Dregs, I had a lot of fun exploring. I feel like there's some like history that comes in book 3 that people are going to really love. They're not too much in book 4, but I do have like an entire quartet planned after this first quartet, and they would be a pretty prominent character in that. So that's great. I loved Dregs. The character that took me most by surprise, Feo, but not because I didn't know what to expect with Feo, but more because I didn't expect people to fawn over Feo as much as they did. Like people are like obsessed with Feo and Wylan and this like coupling that, you know, like isn't even really taking place on page. And I'm just like, okay, like there are people's OTP in this series. And I'm just like, really? Feo and Wylan? Like I hint at it, but like it's not something that I expected people would latch onto so much. So
maybe that was why. Maybe they're like, there wasn't enough.
There wasn't enough. Yeah.
Right.
Well, and like I hint at it in later, but like people would not, like if I had my way, my publisher literally made me change the ending, because if I had my way, people would not like the ending of Feo and Wylan. So I had to like alter it a little bit because my publisher was like, please, it's cozy. And I was like, fine. You know, but I just like their personalities are not going to mesh long term. They won't, you know, and in my mind, I'm like, and there's ways they can overcome that, and they probably will be exploring those. But like, I just was shocked at how obsessed people are over Feo and Wylan's relationship. That took me by surprise by a lot.
So Andrew is asking, if you've just started writing and you have a scene done, how do you piece things together? Like, do you write more scenes and then they go together, or do you have a story arc already?
If you've just started writing and you have a scene done, yeah. So, I mean, I think that a book is just a collection of scenes. So like you're already on your way, you know, like literally like that's pretty much all. Like, yes, it is. You have a scene, then you piece it with another scene, then you piece that with another scene. And then eventually it becomes a story arc because there are enough of those progressing through. I think when I write a scene, I'm always looking for that scene to further either world building, character development, or plot. So like one of those 3 things, every scene in my book has to further one of those 3 things, or it has no place basically in my book. So ideally it would further all 3 of those things. Sometimes it'll only further 2 of those things, but at very minimum, every scene that I write has to further one of those 3 things. So I think that when you're writing scenes, just kind of assess whether or not it's furthering your world building, your character development, or your plot. And if the answer is like, I don't know, it doesn't need to be there, cut it, you know? But overall, I think as you start to write more and more of those, you'll see a story arc take shape. Is that the question? I hope that was an answer.
That seems to make sense to me. And it seems like this goes back to, right, kind of what we've been talking about. If you write out that outline and you spend all this time plotting the whole thing, then you're wasting some time you could be scene building, right? And so if you've already built 2, 3, 4, 5 scenes, how do we piece them together? Right.
So my advice whenever you're like looking at scenes, and I have this in I wrote a craft book, this one. So I wrote a craft book called The 5-Sentence Method because I'm a nerd. And it basically is my plotting method. I use 5 sentences because I don't have the energy to plot out an entire book. Like some people are plotters. They'll write out, 50 pages of information about this novel and everything is meticulously done. And then they just have to go in and write it. And then some people are pantsers where they basically write by the seat of their pants and they have to kind of figure things out as they go along. And like, they just love the surprise of it all. I am somewhere in the middle. I am a plantser. So like I'm a recovering pantser because I used to just do things by the seat of my pants. And then I literally would just like rewrite all of these books because they weren't plot-wise, there were just holes everywhere because I was just like having fun, right? So that 5-sentence method basically comes up with these 5 sentences that allow you to pinpoint like the 5%, the 25%, the 50%, the 75%, and the 95% mark of your novel with 1 sentence each. So it's 5 sentences and it's your entire book. And then all you have to do is figure out the pieces in between, right? So like the 25% to 50% mark, what happens there? And then my question becomes, what would the character do next? Like if I know that I need to get from, like say like the 25% mark of my book is they finish their, creating their shop, and then the 50% mark is dragons attack, right? If I know I need to get from them finishing their shop to dragons attacking, what happens next? Like, what would the characters be doing next? Like, if they finish their shop, they're going to open their shop. Okay, so that's one chapter. If they've opened their shop, there's probably going to be some kind of competition down the street. Okay, so that's another chapter. You know, if there's dragons attacking at the 50% mark, maybe I have some murmurings that the dragons are scouting out the town, right? That's another chapter. So like all of those things kind of lead me to that point where I can like take the breadcrumbs and make it like an actual trail, which is very helpful for me.
So yes, I put actually 2 links to the 5-sentence method in there.
Sorry to plug my own book. It really helps me. And I feel like when people ask me about plotting, I'm just like, do this. I have videos for free if you don't want to pay for the book. There's videos on my TikTok and my Instagram where I go over the 5-sentence method in more detail. But it's basically just 5 sentences that you string together at different points of your book.
Well, first of all, we're here to plug your books. Second of all, people are asking you for advice, so you might as well share the advice you've already written down. This is like, don't double the work up.
Okay, well, wait a minute then. Hang on. Okay, hang on, because I love teaching this stuff. I just don't know how much time people realistically wanted me to spend on it. Okay, so this is it. All right. So this is what oh yeah, okay, good. All right, I wasn't sure if it was like mirrored. Okay, let me see if I can see what's going on here. All right, so take a screenshot of this, because this is the 5-sentence method. So
let's see if I can move you.
You can basically see this 3-act structure happening. And everybody assumes that the 3-act structure is 33%, 33%, 33%. That is not actually true. Technically, Act 1 is supposed to be 25% of your novel. Act 2 is 50% of your novel. And Act 3 is 25% of your novel. So the majority of the book happens in Act 2, which means that the majority of the plot events are going to happen in Act 2. So you have the inciting incident that happens 5% of the way in. That is the moment that everything changes for the main character, right? Like everything that they thought they knew is now wrong. Okay. And this could be as simple as they meet a man who becomes their soulmate, right? All of a sudden, that entire world that they knew before is different. For my characters, it was they decided to leave their intense lives and open up a bookshop that serves tea. That was the inciting incident. They left everything to open up a bookshop. The 25% mark is the leave on a journey moment. That is sometimes called trying to figure out how I phrased it in the book. Basically, it just means that they're leaving the Shire, right? Like they're like physically leaving wherever they had been and moving on to something new. And that could be a metaphorical change or it could be a physical change. In fantasy, it's usually physical because they're physically leaving a town and going to another town. But in like a romance book, it would probably be more metaphorical, although sometimes it could still be physical. If like in Book Lovers, they went to a small town and she was falling in love with somebody at that small town, right? That's the leave on a journey moment. And it kicks off Act 2. So Act 2, in the middle of it, is the midpoint reversal. And this is my favorite part of the entire book because it basically is the moment that everything your character thought they knew changes. So you can basically just take that 50% mark and be like, they thought they were the hero, but at the 50% mark, they realize that they are actually the villain. And that's a huge revelation for them. So in the midpoint reversal for mine, it was like, oh, it's fun book times, fun bookstore times. They're making a bookstore. Look at how great. And then dragons attack at the midpoint. And it's like, oh, there's actually a bigger threat in this town than just creating a bookstore and making it successful. The beginning of the end is the 75% mark. That is the moment where like something happens that drags them down a path that you cannot physically stop. Like whatever that event is, there is no way for them to physically pull back from that event. So like the beginning of the end is mine is that they left in the beginning this vicious queen that Raina served. And in the 75% mark, the queen knows where they are and is ready to come and get Raina. So like there's no way to back out of that. Like they can't hide. They have a bookshop. They can't just run. So she has to confront the queen at that point. And then the conclusion is the 95% mark where everything is done and you have wrapped everything up. So I go into this very in depth in the 5-sentence method, which is this book. And like, there's like graphs and like examples and like, it's very like easy to read. Like I made sure that there were a lot of blank space, a lot of, sections of it that make it feel like it's fast. But I have heard it's very helpful. It's very helpful for me. So if you guys are interested in looking up that method, feel free. It's around.
You should do that.
It's the easiest plotting method that I've ever found. And I worked through so many of them before I learned how to do this. So
Well, Bree has a good question that is an excellent wrapping it up question. So we're going to go with Bree's question to end our episode.
Okay.
How many books are you planning on writing in the series overall?
I have 4 books in this quartet. It is completed at 4 books. So it is going to be like it starts the story in book 1, and every book is a different like vibe. So like they're 6 months apart roughly. And so each book has its own kind of like standalone plot that they resolve inside that book. But overall, there's a couple plots that will like pull them through. So book 1 was they establish the bookshop. Book 2 is they go and they are looking for dragon eggs and they find this pirate and there's just pirates. Book 3 is they get married and they decide to overthrow the queen. And book 4 is more focused on the magical side of things. So they go to the magic area and they're learning more about like elemental magic and alchemy and whether or not those things can mesh. So there's going to be 4 books. Absolutely love book 4. It's my favorite in the series and the cover is amazing for it. Like book 3 I enjoyed. It's like very fun and heisty. Book 4 is like peak cozy. Like it was so good. It was like, it's the perfect book to wrap this series up with. I'm so excited. Both of those will be out this year. So March is book 3 and August is book 4. And then I have a couple more quartets planned in like Tamara Pierce type style where they're different main characters, but they're still set in the same world. And the old main characters that you've already known will come back and do appearances. And we'll see. The next quartet, if I write it, which, depends on whether or not they want to buy it for me, it will be about pirates in the Southern Seas. So there's going to be a pirate who's trying to overthrow dregs. And that's kind of like the plot of the next quartet. So
love.
Yeah, it's going to be super fun. I set up this world to basically be expanded kind of as needed because I really always loved Tamara Pierce growing up and I always wanted to be like that. So it's been very fun for me to kind of add my little like queer version of it. So.
Well, and you get to really say it. You get to really just lean into it. Yeah, because if you read Tamara Pierce, you see it. It's there. But no one was allowed to say that out loud.
I was like, the 90s and O's were not very kind to that. And, and she has retroactively come out and been like, these characters were queer, which is great, but like, would have been nice when I was young to have the books I have now. Like I might have figured some things out a lot earlier. So
exactly. We are at the bookstore. We're starting a adults reading children's classics.
Oh, I love
that. And Elena was it was on my list. I was like,
oh yeah, no, I loved her.
So,
I actually started with Kel, the third quartet. I don't know why, but I did. And I just adored it. If I'm able to write a third quartet after the second quartet, it would be Keantha Reina's kid. Her name is Quinn.
You're already there.
I'm like, yeah, she was in the epilogue.
Just got
she was mentioned
down.
In the epilogue. Yeah, I'm already there. Yeah, but yeah, she was mentioned in the epilogue of book 4. Because I have things planned for this world. Like, there's some really cool stuff that I am probably going to get to do based on how this series has sold. But it'll just depend on when I can get around to it because we're planning kids ourselves with my wife and everything. So like, I've got a cozy sci-fi series coming out probably in 2026 ish, and that has been very fun to write. And then I have to finish Gilded Abyss, which I'm working on. So
by the time you get to Quinn's, maybe you'll have some firsthand experience.
It'll probably be like a decade down the future. Like based on the way that, like even if I started writing this book series in 2026 and 2027, probably we wouldn't even see it published until 2027 or 2028 for the first quartet, which means we'd be going into the 30s for the next quartet.
The 30s.
We'll see. Yeah, the 30s.
Wow. Yeah. Let's not think about that now. Okay. But I am looking forward to all of these books.
I'm just hoping we get to the 30s at this point,
Yes, for sure. So I put a link earlier to all of Rebecca's books that are currently in print. So you can grab the Tomes and Tea series. The first 2 are out now. The third one is March. The fourth one is August. The 5-sentence method and a few other books that she has out and about.
I've got many.
Yes.
And I'm writing 4 this year, so
no
cross
problem.
your fingers. No
this.
Pressure. It's easy. It's fine. Cross your fingers for me.
You wrote that whole method. You got this.
Yeah.
Well, you have to keep writing and you keep using that method so that you can continue to be like, oh, look, it works. See? see all these books?
I've been pleasantly surprised with how well it works for me. And I've heard from many, many people that they are obsessed with it. Like a lot of people are just like, I couldn't finish a book. And then I learned this method and it was so simple and so easy. And I'm like, that's why I wrote it down, because it made like, it's not new. Like it's basically the first couple steps of the snowflake method coupled with a few things from like Save the Cat. And I read all those things and just kind of meshed them together and was like, this is the method I want to use, and I liked it. So I wrote it down.
That's what it takes. Just taking ideas from other things, putting them all into one and going for it.
Yeah, it worked well.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining me for Book Banter.
Yeah, my pleasure
talking to you.
Yeah.
And thank you to everyone who watched and everyone who commented. I see you. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming, guys. If you have any other questions, hit me up on social media. I am always ready to answer most things. So,
all right. Y'all have a good evening.
Bye.
Bye.